Today I'm going to talk a little bit about transitions for learners with autism, how that can be a struggle, especially if they're dealing with emotional dysregulation, the ability to understand changes, and the ability to be flexible in their day. Maybe they're stalling, maybe they're refusing, maybe they're having meltdowns. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Happy Memorial Day weekend. I'm filming this on Memorial Day really quick because I didn't bother to do it all weekend because we were at a tournament. So really quick, why are these transitions so difficult? What about the transitions are they struggling with? Some of the things to think about is it requires flexibility with how they interact with the environment. So they need to understand things like predictive thinking. If I'm leaving something, I can come back to it. It doesn't mean that when I'm leaving this activity that I'm not able to come back to it. You also are dealing a little bit with emotional regulation when it comes with facing challenges that make them a little uncomfortable. So if I have to leave something and I get a little charged up about that, how am I dealing with my emotions during those times? That is something that we have to teach, right? If I don't feel safe or feel comfortable with leaving something because it makes me feel very uncomfortable, then I'm going to have a hard time dealing with my emotions that are wrapped around the transition from something. Also, transitions can feel unpredictable, right? So sometimes they lead to something fun and that was cool, and so I didn't mind this transition as much after I got over it, but sometimes they don't lead to something that I'd rather do. And I really want to do what I've been asked to leave to begin with. So the other thing is, how long is this transition going to take, right? If I have to leave something I like and I have to come back to it later, how long will that take? So my kid was pounding on the door. I don't even know where I left off. Maybe the transition away from something feels chaotic. It's not planned. Maybe it's not part of the routine. It might be a little chaotic because other kids in the room or in the house are also jumbled up in that transition and they're not liking it either. Where is it going to lead to? Literally take 3. Now the dog is barking. This is just a bad idea today. So it's unpredictable. Transitions can feel unpredictable. Can you hear her? Can you hear her? There's a cat outside. She's losing her mind. So how can we set up the environment so that we at least support our learner and make transitions a little bit more predictable? Let's go over some of the basics. Think of things like timers. Even if it's just an auditory timer, I love those visual timers that show the countdown. A lot of learners can really get on board with seeing the time elapse, and that's helpful to them. Think of a verbal countdown. I have some teachers who do a quick 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or a 3, 2, 1 countdown. Another option. Consider things like music or the flashing of the lights in the classroom. That can be very helpful. It's something that helps cue that there's a change in expectation, right? Visual schedules, pictures, those are all helpful. First then last, that can all be very helpful. But you want to start to set the tone that something is coming and I'm going to show you that there's going to be a change in expectation, and then I'm going to support you through that change in expectation the best we can. What can we do to help support these transitions? Try the best you can to set value in the transition. Is there some way to make that transition valuable? If where they're going is not valuable, do they need a transitional item? So for one of my learners in a classroom, she struggles with just the transitions in centers. Every transition is a little difficult for this little girl, even with a visual, even with a timer and some cues. So what we have done is to give her a piece of the upcoming activity, and it's always something that she does enjoy. It's not her highest preferred, but she does enjoy. So we give her a piece of it and we show her, look, let's say table 2. So table 2 starts with this thing that she tends to enjoy. So she, let's put, for example, might have a piece of Velcro and the file folder game is on the table. So that Velcro then matches to the file folder. She finishes the file folder and then we can transition much more peacefully to the activity that is set for center 2. So that is definitely a way to look at it. Put value in the transition. Also, take a beat. Don't rush. Some of our learners who may stall or be resistant, just give them the space to tell you that they're not in it right now. A lot of students may say 1 more minute or I'm not ready. Honor that communication as a way of letting them express that they're not really ready. They're a little anxious maybe, or they're not prepared for the upcoming transition. And then let's just take a beat. Practice small changes. Sometimes when you have a student who's struggling with transitions in general, just making small incremental changes is helpful to get them accustomed to little transitions that we can control for better, right? We can make them more predictable. We can increase a lot of value into those transitions. So things like just giving up something and transitioning maybe a few feet to the table, but then doing something very special at that table. And then doing that throughout the day so that these small demands help build up their toleration for and their trust in transitions in general. Another way to teach transitions in small increments is to teach a change card. So you would set up a maybe first, next, last, or a visual schedule, and then you would purposefully come in and change one of the elements with a visual card that shows the learner, look, this activity is no longer going to happen. This is changing, and this activity is going to happen instead. And again, you want to try and build values. We'll start off with maybe higher valued activities. So if they're leaving, let's say for example, their trucks, but they're moving to puzzles and they do tend to enjoy puzzles too, that would be something that may be of equal value. And then you can move to, I'm leaving my truck, but now I'm going to come do Play-Doh, and Play-Doh is not really one of my favorite things to do, or I'm going to color, and I'm not really a big fan of coloring. So that is how you then transition to tolerating those exchanges, my truck for, and building transitions and building tolerance for coming to something that maybe are not as preferred. Another thing to consider is to play games that cause change and that requires some flexibility. And Uno is one that comes off the top of my head really quickly, but look for games that help to create that vibe of we have to be flexible and move with the punches of the game. Other things to consider would be make sure that you are talking with other members of the school so that when you are working on transitions, let's say from the classroom to the gym, and you're doing that in incremental steps, let's say that's your goal, then the other people in the hallway, maybe security, administration, other teachers, understand how to interact or engage with your student or not during this time, so that they know that you're working on something and that they don't have to inject themselves into the process. They can take the lead from what I usually call the primary person working with the student. And then this way it avoids too many people hovering over your student. It reduces the amount of noise and commotion that's coming around the transition, and it will help to reduce the stress that your learner is feeling during this time. Giving people a heads up that this is something you're working towards can be very helpful. Another thing would be to neutralize your response to when they are stalling. So again, much like telling other people what's happening, you also want to ensure that you're neutralizing your own response or the staff member's response to the stalling tactics. You're going to take a beat. You're going to demonstrate to the child that I understand this is difficult for you, and we will get there, but we will get there slowly and incrementally. And then reinforce successive approximations towards the goal. So if the goal, let's say, is that you're going from classroom to gym, and they get halfway down the hallway and then they're like, I'm not ready, I don't want to go, then it may be appropriate to let that learner know, hey, I heard you, we can go back and we can try this again. Practicing getting to gym would occur during times of the day that were not just intended to actually make it to gym. So you want to make sure that you're practicing these types of things, like I said earlier, at different points of the day and in small increments so that you can set that up for success. And also put value in that transition. So if the child is getting there, maybe the gym teacher is aware that they have to do something a little extra nice for that child when they do arrive, or maybe it's just the expectation of I arrive, the gym teacher's at the door, I gave a high five, maybe I wave, and I get to leave. And then we try again another day. So if any of this resonates with you, I do have webinars on Thinkific, and I'm also can be found on Behavior Live. You can check me out on Instagram, where I put tons of information about skills that support our learners when we're looking to improve sleep. Yes, this is actually related to sleep and how you can improve sleep in the long run with those families. So if you have a learner who is inflexible or has difficulty with transitions, what comes during bedtime? Truckloads of transitions, leaving things I prefer to do to have to go to bed. So this is all something that can be very interconnected. Check those out, and until next time.